This podcast includes graphic depictions of true crime cases and may contain explicit language. Listener discretion is advised. Hello, everyone. You are listening to We Saw the Devil, and this is Robin.
And this is Jackie.
And we are back.
We are back.
We finished up the Heaven's Gate series, We Ascended, and then the next big case that we are covering is the Lori Vallow deep dives of starting from the very beginning, implementing everything that we know now, and telling the story from the beginning. Also, we will be picking another cult to cover.
A lot of you wanted us to get killed and do Scientology.
Yeah. I love all of our patrons. If you're a patron, you have the option to assist in voting for what the next case is going to be, especially with the cult episodes and series. I love each and every one of you, but I would like to not get followed or doxxed or...
You know, we liked the idea of being employable in the future because I don't want to be in a grave, do you?
No. And Portland has a massive amount of Scientologists.
It's actually really surprising. You wouldn't think, because a lot of people in Portland are very educated.
Yes. But we had to take a break. It was a lot of writing, a lot of research. And so we took a couple days. Please forgive us, but we are back. So as we were taking recess, we reviewed all of the submissions for the contest. And it was impossible.
All of them were so good.
All of them were so good. And we appreciate everyone who participated. And as we've said in all of our previous episodes, we are going to do a lot of giveaways.
I have to say, I kept reading them over and over again. I'm like, I'm their biggest fan.
Yeah. It was hard to choose, but alas, guys, we have a winner.
Drum roll.
Please, Amber Wilderspin. I'm so sorry if I butchered your name, but Amber Wilburspin, come on down. You have won a $50 Martha Stewart dark web murder box.
Mystery box.
So I will be reaching out to you, Amber, on Instagram. Like we said, it was a really, really hard decision after reading everyone's, but Amber's, yours just
stood out to us.
We loved it. And thank you so much. Guys, seeing all of the support and kind words and wonderful things that you said about us, we really appreciate it.
It kind of felt like The Bachelor, and I had to pick one. I'm like, Amber.
The rose ceremony.
You can marry me, Amber. That's okay.
Yeah, so Amber, you're getting a rose. So before we get into today's episode, let's get some housekeeping out of the way.
Where can they find us, Robin?
You can find us at our website, wesawthedevil.com. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter at We Saw the Devil. And you can find us on Instagram at We Saw the Devil Podcast. So for this week, guys, we have this episode, and then we will have the first official Lori Vallow deep dive episode coming out as well.
Is it Lori Vallow for Dummies?
Lori Vallow for Dummies.
I love the cover art for it, I'm not gonna lie.
You're welcome.
It's so funny. Good job.
So let's get into it. Foot scrapings, nail clippings, used panties, Snotty Kleenex, and Gravesite soil. Letters and artwork make up most of the items that you will find on murderabilia sites, but there have also been some really big oddities. There's been a used Kleenex that belonged to Charles Manson, the Santa Claus suit worn by John Edward Robinson, and the flaked-off foot skin of the railway killer. If you recall, the convicted crossdresser and cannibal Haddon Clark, he actually traced his penis on a piece of paper and then splashed the drawing with semen and coffee. And it sold for hundreds of dollars.
I wish I could sell... Never mind. I'm not even going to go there, Robin. And that's gross.
So I looked up Adolf Hitler paintings for sale. And it only took me 2 clicks, literally just 2 clicks. I was able to bid on one of over 30 of Adolf Hitler's watercolor paintings. And the prices varied from $1,000 to $300,000. And if you're really feeling fancy, you can get a first edition signed copy of Mein Kampf for $12,000.
How sad.
And, you know, on the website of Serial Killer Inc., one of the most notorious websites for things like this, you can buy the full 16-minute long video of the New Zealand Christchurch mosque shooting.
Okay, that's messed up.
Yeah, remember the one where the killer streamed himself like live on Facebook, and he had the chest cam and he streamed it live as he was killing people in the mosque? Terrible. And you can buy the full video of it that's now been taken offline.
Would you buy it, Robin?
Absolutely not. And that video is nestled in between letters, mail correspondence, artwork, mug shots, and that's coming from a variety of categorized killers. You can search by cannibals, necrophiliacs, school shooters, mass shooters, pretty much any mode of criminality you can think of. You can download the full psychological exams of Dahmer, Gacy, and Bundy. Ed Gein, all of those. You can actually download their whole case file, like what court-appointed psychiatrists. You can buy that for like $12. So what would happen if tomorrow Chris Watts's penis outline ended up on one of these websites for, say, $1,000? Would you buy it? Would you find it funny, entertaining, historical? Would one of your friends buy it? And how would you feel about it if they did? Because Chris Watts's case, you cannot escape it right now.
No, it's everywhere.
And I've never seen women as a whole kind of crowd around one criminal case. And personally, for myself, I have the cases that I find most interesting. To me personally, Chris Watts is just a regular case.
There's a lot of them, yeah.
Nothing special. But for some reason, women just are obsessed with this case. So how would you feel if he drew an outline of his penis and sold it online? Would you purchase it? And why? Regardless of how you feel, why would you feel that way? For centuries, people have collected items that they were particularly interested in. And back in ancient Mesopotamia, it defined an entire social class, the ruling class, the wealthy. They became that way because they were collectors. They came into fruition because of the act of collecting.
Would you be wealthy if you collected Chris Watts's outline of his penis?
I don't know.
Maybe.
Throughout the world's history, the hobby of locating, acquiring, displaying, and maintaining random tidbits of human history has always been present. This isn't just for people to collect like things randomly off the internet from crime scenes. You have the Mob Museum in Las Vegas. You have Alcatraz East in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. That has both Ted Bundy's Volkswagen Beetle and O.J. Simpson's Bronco on display. You have the Museum of Death in Hollywood, California. And that had such a success that they actually ended up opening a second location in New Orleans. The Museum of Death in Hollywood houses the world's largest collection of serial killer artwork, Manson family memorabilia, crime scene photographs, and serial killer tools.
Even I would want to see that, though.
Yeah.
Should I feel bad for that? That's my question.
Right. So what makes it different for a museum or private collection, because that is a collection, versus someone who sees something online and they have the ability to purchase it to put on their own personal wall?
It's amazing how many things are actually out there. I mean, John Wayne Gacy's paintings, even.
They're creepy, and if you have, 15, 20,000, or if not more to spare, you can buy a painting originally done by John Wayne Gacy. This entire thing has been very, very, very controversial, and some of you may have seen a couple documentaries on the topic. In the late 1990s, it actually became a really, really, really big deal. There was a man by the name of Andy Kahn, and he was the director of the Houston, Texas Police Department's Crime Victims Office. One day, he was on vacation, and he read that serial killer Arthur Shawcross was selling paintings out of his cell, and they were ending up for auction on eBay. He immediately coined the phrase murderabilia to describe the collectible items. And he decided to devote his entire life to stopping the sale of things like this on websites like murderauction.com, darkvomit.com, Serial Killers Inc. There are a lot of them out there that have, it's almost like an online auction site, eBay, as it were, for items like this.
But less desirable to produce a desirable product.
That's true.
That's kind of what it is, huh?
Mm-hmm. Murderabilia is just a broad term used to describe items used or involved with a crime or murder, or by those who were involved.
I wonder what the weirdest thing was. I've always wondered that.
There's a lot of random stuff. Andy Kahn traveled the United States doing lectures on the topic of murderabilia, and he carried with him a red duffel bag filled with the same stuff that he spoke out against. As we mentioned early on in the episode, he had foot scrapings and nail clippings and all sorts of heinous things tucked away in his duffel bag.
So technically, he's a collector.
He's a collector as well, yes. And the irony was not lost on him either. In a 2010 interview with Fox News, Khan said, quote, "I'm of the opinion you just shouldn't be able to rob, rape, and murder and be able to turn around and make a profit off of it."
I agree with that.
100%. Now, his message was so powerful that Texas Republican Senator John Cornyn and Minnesota Democratic Senator Amy Klobuchar came together to write the Stop the Sale of the Murderabilia to Protect the Dignity of Crime Victims Act of 2010.
Oh, wow.
They came together because they were so disgusted by this.
That's very compassionate.
It is. And it would have prevented prisoners from mailing any object the prisoner intended to be sold in interstate commerce. So the bill provided a civil remedy to murderabilia victims, allowing them to recover injunctive relief, damages, and attorney's fees from violators of the bill. So let's say that BTK, he's still alive. You know, he does write people. He writes letters. Let's say that he doodled on a piece of paper and it gets sent out, and it's basically proven that he knew that that doodle was going to be sold for, say, $1,000. Then that would be confiscated. The person who was doing the selling would be fined, and all of that money would go to basically a victim's fund.
I think that's reasonable.
So that alone, that bill would have removed almost any financial gain or advantage from all of these transactions. The bill was read, but then referred to an external committee and died entirely. Sales have continued online and through private auctions. Remember Trayvon Martin? Remember walking piece of crap George Zimmerman? How he killed Trayvon Martin? He ended up listing the handgun that he used to murder Martin for sale.
What?
He listed it on eBay. And the auction on eBay was removed from the website, but he actually still sold it for over $250,000.
Clearly, he sold it in good taste, right?
Yeah. He is a sack of filth.
Yeah.
And it's not just everyday true crime enthusiasts who buy murder memorabilia. And in 2011, the United States government actually started doing it. It actually contacted multiple people from these websites like Serial Killers Inc. and whatnot and started buying pieces from them, like the CIA, the FBI. In fact, various federal law enforcement agencies have purchased true crime memorabilia from collectors just to utilize it in a classroom. Like, can you imagine sitting down in a criminal profiling class and reading the actual notes of Charles Manson's
or BTK,
or BTK's handwriting analysis?
Albert Fish.
Yeah,
that would be a crazy one to read.
Yeah, those things do have purpose there. In June of 2011, the U.S. government actually auctioned off personal items that belonged to the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski. They actually, when they raided his remote Montana cabin, they impounded almost everything in the cabin. Well, they sold it off in an auction online. Everything sold out within minutes, and every penny from the proceeds went to the victims. Because as of right now, you know, the big question is, well, they shouldn't profit. The killer, the criminal should not profit.
I agree with that.
But has the criminal profited yet? Eric Holler, he's the owner-operator of Serial Killer Inc. Serial Killer Inc. is still up and functional. You can go on there right now and you can see a list of all the messed up, weird items that they have. He said, quote, "These items are in fact world history. I have a few criminal law professors that use the letters to help teach their classes. A psychologist buys one for me to get a better understanding of their minds. I would like to think that these men and women are using these items in a way with hopes of one day preventing a crime such as the Pike story." Now, by Pike, he means Krista Pike. Krista Pike was 18 years old when she murdered her classmate, Colleen Slimmer. She lured Colleen into a private area and then killed her by bashing her skull in with a rock, slitting her throat almost 6 inches deep, and then carved a pentagram on her chest between her breasts.
Oh my God.
Eric, the owner of Serial Killer Inc., actually befriended Krista Pike while she was in prison. Some people say that there was a romantic link there, but she ended up giving him a pair of her signed used panties.
What?
He actually did end up selling them on Serial Killer Inc. for an undisclosed sum of money.
Yeah, I don't like him.
Now, a lock of her hair sold for $50. Just a little lock of her hair.
That's not creepy.
Mm-hmm. But she wasn't the first killer that he had come in contact with. When he was in his early 20s, he just decided to casually start writing Richard Ramirez in prison.
Just casually.
And they became friends.
Friends.
He calls Richard Ramirez one of his closest friends. Ramirez would send him artwork with his letters, little doodles, little things. And although Eric didn't start selling them at first, he was like, I'm kind of over this. And he listed them on eBay. And he said that within hours, everything was gone and sold out. So he decided to reach out to other killers, infamous criminals, and then back to Richard Ramirez and be like, hey, bro,
It's kind of funny he's using them.
Yeah. He does have his own set of standards, he claims, though. I mean, this is how he created an entire business. And all of these criminals send him letters and art and all of this, like, different stuff.
I'm doubting his standards, though.
Yeah. He says that he will not sell any items related to convicted pedophiles. He says he will, however, sell pieces by people who kill pedophiles.
Oh.
He sold a hand tracing by convicted murderer John Druce for $40. Now, if you recall, Druce strangled and stomped to death the pedophile Catholic priest, John Gagan, to death in prison in Massachusetts back in 2003. And Gagan had molested between 150 and 200 children.
Oh my God. God bless.
Right. God bless you, Mr. Druce. What John Druce did is he traced his hand, and then at the bottom of his hand, he said, leave the children alone, and then signed it.
Oh my God.
And that sold for $40.
$40.
So, yeah, I mean, how are you feeling about this so far, Jackie?
I feel conflicted because I hate pedophiles and I'm totally on board with people who kill them. I hate to say that, but inside I have a lot of anger for that.
Yeah.
But then again, it's like, is it misplaced anger? Should I not be on board with this? Like, I'm so conflicted. Like I said, I feel like I don't think that anybody should profit off of it per se. I think that the victims should absolutely have recoup costs. But then again, I think about scholars, right? And I think about professionals and people who are in an educational setting with letters and whatnot. I feel like it should be in an archive, a public archive for education. Because we don't know enough, psychologically speaking, about why people kill. What drives you to kill? What happened? There's so many different reasons, psychologically speaking, that could drive somebody and motive,
No, it's true. And I actually was scrolling through news and I saw a case the other day. I posted it on my Facebook, but it's about a guy. And it actually made me think of this particular episode. In 2011, Matthew Hoffman was convicted of holding a 13-year-old girl hostage after killing her family in their home and stuffing their dismembered body parts in a hollow tree.
What?
And the psychiatrist who actually interviewed him said that he was the single most unique criminal mind she has ever come across, ever heard of, because his fetish, his paraphilia, was trees. That was trees. His home, and you can actually look at pictures of his home apartment. He filled his living room with leaves. And he would do dirty things. He would have sex with trees and holes in trees. His bed was made out of leaves. And, like I said, the psychiatrist said that he's the most unique convicted killer that she's ever witnessed or seen because his mental illness and delusion is so severe. If you look at his entire house, he would collect leaves and then he lined his apartment with bags of leaves.
That's so weird.
He was, yeah. So, I mean, can you imagine if, people, if they were able to have an archive of all of these different letters and psych reports or, things like journals. We just covered the Joel Guy Jr. case a couple weeks ago, and he journaled all of it.
It's weird that he took Kmart bags, like shopping bags, and filled it with leaves and lined the inside of his home. Yeah. And what's so weird is that...
Have you ever heard that?
No, I've heard of people having fetishism towards trees.
Was it ecosexuals or arborsexuals?
Arborists gone wild.
Oh my God.
Sorry. That's kind of a victimless crime, right? You would think. But then when they go a step further, is no longer a victimless crime. So I hypothesize that a lot of serial killers are linked to fetishism that has gone completely uncuffed. It can be a fixation.
Fixation, yeah.
And that makes them hyper-fixated. And it goes too far. Mm-hmm. It becomes like a mental illness within itself.
Yeah, it does. And, per the Merck manual, the professional version of this, so fetishes is fetishism is a form of paraphilia, but most people who have fetishism do not actually meet the clinical criteria for a paraphilic disorder. Now, a paraphilic disorder, to have a disorder, requires that the person's behavior, fantasies, or urges result in clinically significant distress or functional impairment. And this must go on, this condition has to be present greater than 6 months. And there are many types of fetishes. And a lot of the items, right, that you find on murderabilia websites or so forth are related to fetishes.
Like BTK. BTK is a good example of that.
No, I mean, BTK would be the perfect example. To my understanding and to my knowledge, nothing has been sold from BTK because that was confiscated, and hasn't made its way onto the interwebs. However, that would be a pure example. If you recall BTK, he would put on his wife or victims' nightgowns and high heels and take pictures of himself with ropes and things like that.
It was purely sexual fetishism, like paraphilia. He had a paraphilic disorder.
Yes,
sure.
he did, 100%.
And I feel like the same thing, right? Like, from my reading, is that a lot of serial killers cannot get off without the act of
something. Yeah, so here are some fetishes. And you can actually cross-reference some of these with particular serial killers. We have aprons, shoes, leather or latex, and then even women's underclothing. And it can also be behaviors too, choking.
Yeah.
Strangling. Asphyxiation. Whether it's
foot fetishes.
Foot fetishes is another big one. So what are some other paraphilias? And I know we're kind of branching out here, but the way that this connects is that a lot of items that you can find on these websites, beyond the letters and the pictures and mugshots and things like that, are related to paraphilias. So here's a list of some. And again, it's not saying that all of these things are disorders. A paraphilia is just a sexual interest in objects, situations, or people or things that are considered atypical. So atypical versus disorder, okay? So here's a list of them. We have people being attracted to ... people with impaired mobility, people with amputations, statues, mannequins, and immobility, pain, particularly involving an erogenous zone. And that differs from masochism because there's a biologically different interpretation of the sensation rather than just a subjective interpretation. There's also paraphilia involving being attracted to trans men, the attraction by young men to older women. People laugh and say, oh, I only like cougar, I'm a cougar hunter. That is actually considered a paraphilia.
Whoa, man, calm down.
Raping and then cannibalizing another person.
That escalated quickly.
Yeah. Ingesting human flesh. Being an amputee. And I do have to make a side note on the amputee piece that we've said twice now.
You have a story, don't you?
I actually watched a documentary, and there is an entire group of people all across the world, just thousands of people, who believe that they are amputees. And they voluntarily lop off limbs and, whatever. And in order to achieve this sexual...
You've met somebody who's done it, haven't you?
I have not.
I see it on your face. No, you did. You did, Robin.
I have not.
Back in Maine.
So, story time. So, I was living in Maine, as most of you know, especially those longtime listeners to the old podcast, and had a friend, and she had an ex-husband. Ex-husband ended up saying, being gay. And so he divorced. They were best friends. It was a friendly divorce, be yourself. Normal enough. They saw each other almost every other day. Like, it was a good situation. All of a sudden, I get a phone call, like in the middle of a work day. And this woman says, Robin, I need you to come over to my house right now. And so my friend and I do. And her ex-husband had ended up purposefully sawing off his own hand.
But why, Robin? Why would you do that?
So no one had an answer right off the bat, and no one understood. No one could think of why he would do that.
What a bloody mess.
It was bloody. I saw the aftermath of it. I mean, I didn't see the hand itself, but there was a circle saw that he used outside against the shed.
Oh my God.
And he cut off his entire hand at the wrist, a little bit above the wrist. I was called, and I actually helped wash and use a hose to wash the blood off because they had children, small children.
That's so sad.
And she didn't want them seeing it. But it came out that he did this because it was a sexual thing for him. that he
had a gain.
He gained sexual pleasure from cutting off his own hand.
That is so twisted.
It is. It is very, very twisted indeed.
I feel bad for the kids.
Yeah, and I will never forget. I mean, it looked like it was out of a horror movie on the side of their outside work shed. It was just like someone took a paintbrush of something and then just splattered it.
And this, I know this is a very odd segue, but when you talk about like the Lori Vallow case, right? And I've talked about this before, that when somebody murders someone and they go into like dismemberment and stuff, it leaves so much evidence.
It does.
And a lot of the time they don't realize how involved it is. And so they abandon the idea, and it's very sloppy.
And that's why I'm wondering if, side note again, digressing, if Joel Guy Jr., how, he left his mother's head boiling on the stove. He left all of this stuff just, there, but he was supposed to burn down the house. But he
Was
just
he
left.
really?
That was the ultimate plan, is burning down the house. But he didn't. He just left it.
I don't know why I missed that tidbit of information. That's crazy.
So, I wonder if he just got into it and was like, damn, this is too hard to do this. And, Chad Daybell and the kids, I mean...
They say that when you're dismembering a body, that you also get bone shards a lot.
Do.
And you have to understand, when you're using things like circular saws or any type of cutting object that's mechanical, it goes everywhere.
Yeah, it sprays. I mean, like little tiny little shards
We're
go
talking
everywhere.
about on the microscopic level even is enough to convict somebody with evidence. And
Right.
be like, something happened here. Here is... here's DNA. Here's something of this. And it's so insane to think that somebody would willingly do it to their own hand.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I can't imagine that kind of like paraphilia or fetish.
Yeah, but he sure did. He did it because it was a sexual pleasure for him. So a couple other paraphilias. We have people with one or more physical disabilities, being asphyxiated or strangled, being on stage or on camera. So again, that's very common. People who like and have to be voyeurs, more or less, but like to an extreme. Being in life-threatening situations.
Oh God, no, thank you.
Self-induced asphyxiation, which everyone knows as autoerotic asphyxiation, where you get to the point of consciousness usually as you orgasm. And that's usually when people orgasm. And then if you recall, Iris, who came on the show a couple months ago.
I was about to just be like, she didn't amputate herself, right? Like, is she okay? I'm kidding.
How she had a victim that was a victim of autoerotic asphyxiation. That's actually more common than you think. Sexual arousal of a biological male and the response to the image of himself presenting as female.
Interesting.
Also bleeding oneself. And it does not involve ingesting it, just bleeding. That's actually called autovampirism.
Ooh, that's kind of cool sounding.
Yeah. Autohemofetishism, also known as autovampirism.
I could see how that could go wrong, though.
Mm-hmm. And then the image of oneself in the form of an infant.
Oh.
The image of oneself in the form of a child.
Oh, like the adult babies.
And then here we go, my all-time favorite. Again, let me speak this loudly and clearly. The image of oneself in the form of a plush, anthropomorphized animal.
Oh, I can't.
So furries.
Sorry, furries.
Sorry, furries. The image of oneself in the form of a vampire. And that is autovampirism. And the main definition of the autovampirism is ingesting or seeing one's own blood.
Own blood. Interesting.
And then autozoophilia, which is, again, the image of oneself in the form of an animal or anthropomorphized animal.
I feel like that goes too far. It creeps me out.
Yeah.
I don't care who disagrees with me. It creeps me out. Like, it just gives me such a wrong feeling in my stomach when I see like people who are furries and stuff. I'm like, yeah, no.
And then we have all of your regulars, right? You have feeding people. Have any of you seen the movie Feed, where it's literally about a man who runs a website where he feeds women?
He feeds women?
Feeds women.
I saw, didn't we see a documentary on Netflix about, what was it? Was it Turned On?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, and he kept feeding his wife.
Yeah.
So much food and jiggling her belly.
Yeah.
Because their goal was to make her over 600 pounds.
Yeah, I think 800 pounds. Was like their goal.
She had big goals. But that's crazy. He kept feeding her pizza. I'm like, man, I want that to be me.
So exhibitionism is actually considered a paraphilia. Again, these are not disorders necessarily. They're just showing atypical sexual desires. So exposing one's genitals. You have...
Everyone, if you lived in New York City, you've seen someone with that, I'm sure.
You have being crawled on by insects, turning a human being into a piece of furniture. So if you've seen, various just like indie films, even how people will get hot and bothered over, say, their secretary acting as a desk or a table. That is, in fact, a fetish.
What? Really?
Yep.
That's crazy. What about Ed Gein? Did he make a lampshade out of human skin?
Yes, he did. Drinking or looking at blood, firearms, guns, criminals, pedophilia, stealing. The list goes, breast milk, particular shapes or body sizes, mucus, dirtiness, soiled or decaying things, corpses, which is necrophilia. I love horror movies, and Necromantic was one of the first, weird movies that I saw.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know.
Oh no, you're traumatized from that movie.
I am traumatized from that movie.
She brings it up almost weekly.
I do.
Traumatized her, and it's been years since she first saw it.
It's not even that bad. It's from the late 80s. It's not even that bad. But if any of you guys want a little homework, I dare you to Google the word munting.
Enter if you dare.
Enter if you dare and Google munting.
Halloween homework.
And this will be the last time anybody listens to us.
Don't do it. I want to say something though about these paraphilia. So ladies, if you are in the dating realm and you're looking for a new hot date, look for these signs in people. If they're trying to request very specific sexual things, maybe think twice.
I love topics like this, but a lot of the items that you find on murderabilia sites and things like that have to do with their paraphilias. Now, one modern collector, John Schwank, said in an interview with U.S. News, quote, "In my eyes, my hobby is no different than collecting salt and pepper shakers, coins, stamps, or even mortuary items. In many people's eyes, it is a taboo, but in reality, these items are a part of our history, things that have happened throughout the years and will never be forgotten."
I think mortuary items are kind of cool.
But
oddities.
But what about the victims and the victims' families? What if they want to forget the heinous acts that were committed against them or their loved ones? You hear one of the biggest combatants of this stuff, between Amy Klobuchar and John Cornyn and, the parents and family members who came out in support of that particular bill. They don't want to be constantly reminded of it. In 1999, 20-year-old Jennifer Louise Still was stabbed to death by a man named John Eichinger. And her mom, Wendy Levon, said, quote, "It's wrong on so many levels," because she discovered that letters written by Eichinger were being sold online. So he murdered her daughter, and then his letters were being passed around and sold on websites like this. And she said, "I felt sick to my stomach. Someone's life was torn apart, and no one should be able to profit from it." But who does profit from stuff like this?
Good question.
In 1977, New York State was the first to enact the Son of Sam law. And I know a lot of people have talked about the Son of Sam laws. At the time, law enforcement thought that David Berkowitz, the famed Son of Sam, New York City serial killer, was going to write a book about his murders. And the Son of Sam law prevented accused or convicted people from making money from speaking or writing books or essays or stories about their crimes. So the federal government, in response, along with 41 other states, followed by passing the Son of Sam laws. And currently, 45 states have some semblance of Son of Sam statutes on the books. The Supreme Court, though, eventually ruled that these laws infringed on the First Amendment rights of the imprisoned criminals. So many states struck the Son of Sam laws off the books, but then they came back and added individual statutes. And because they can't limit their voice, what they can do is they can limit the financial aspect of it, the financial benefit and gain. Try to limit those financial benefits that a prisoner could make from the crimes that they had committed. However, there are clearly loopholes. So let's go back to the example from the beginning of this episode of Chris Watts. Let's say that Chris Watts begins to correspond with, say, a woman named Cheryl, and she's outside of prison. And they become pen pals and friends. Now, if you've heard, Chris Watts has a shit ton of female pen pals. Like, it's all over the news.
Really?
Yeah, lots and lots. Women just, I mean, there's a reason why people are obsessed with him. He has hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of letters from adoring fans.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So let's say this woman named Cheryl writes him. They become pen pals, whatever their dynamic is, doesn't matter. And he ends up tracing his penis on a piece of paper and mails it to her. So she's like, oh, wow, I can make money off of this. So she puts it up on Serial Killers Inc., the website, and she puts it up for $1,000. And then enter Monica. Monica's a married 43-year-old all-American mom and true crime enthusiast. And she decides to buy it out of sheer curiosity. You know, she's obsessed with the Chris Watts case. She's like, oh, this will be funny. You know, just kind of have like a little thing and something unique out of the norm. And Cheryl, the broker of this deal, she makes $1,000 off of it. You know, Chris Watts did nothing. He traced his penis, his member, and then sent it to Cheryl. Cheryl puts it up on one of these websites. Boom, $1,000 payday. But she then deposits, say, $25 into Chris Watts's commissary account as a thank you. So in that sense, do you believe that Chris Watts has profited? Because Cheryl, as a friend of Chris Watts, would have put the money anyway, regardless, because that's what these people are doing. From even the sheer act of writing them, they're putting money into their accounts as kind of like a friendship gesture.
Oh my God.
So whether Chris Watts, you know, made like his own personal dick pic or not, Cheryl would have given him that money. So because his member was sold, the tracing was sold to somebody, do you consider Chris Watts having profited that way?
I do.
All courts currently say no.
Why?
Yeah.
Why?
So Andy Kahn, that caped crusader against murderabilia, said, quote, crime is a big business. Murder, for some reason, has seemed to achieve a status as a form of entertainment globally. We continue to give serial killers and mass murderers infamy and immortality they richly don't deserve by continuing to give them platforms. And the murderabilia industry is just another way for them to keep their name relevant. And if you haven't, so what do you guys think? What does everyone think? Do you think this trade should be completely shut down? Do you think, would you yourself buy, say, a Gacy painting or Ed Gein's?
Is this historical?
Yeah.
Is there historical value? I think that there's teaching value. I think there's a learning lesson from a lot of this stuff, like the letters, but I don't think educators should have to pay for it.
Yeah.
There should be an archive.
Or what is the difference from the Death Museum in Los Angeles versus someone privately and quietly keeping it, you know, say on their living room wall? There are also private collectors all across the country. One particular one is in Indianapolis, and he has an incredible collection of everything. And it's his home, and by request, he will take you on a private tour of it.
And what's the difference between people who are serial killers, right, and kill many versus those who commit genocide?
Exactly.
Is that historical enough? Even though if they were a leader and they commit genocide, is it historical just because they happen to be a leader, or is it still in the same realm of moral questioning?
Yeah, I mean, there are lots of people who collect World War II memorabilia, in particular Nazi memorabilia. And there are people who couldn't be further from, you know, Nazis. They're just really interested in the history of it, like purely just the history, and they're fascinated by it. And they want to preserve it. Some people collect
like the plates and everything.
Yeah.
Or items that were taken away from victims.
I actually met a Jewish man in my early years in college. He was a professor who had a large collection of Nazi memorabilia, and he was a Polish Jew, and his entire family had died in a concentration camp. But he was fascinated by Nazi memorabilia. But yeah, so what do you think? Is there a difference between genocide, serial killers, mass shooters? Should you just say hell no and throw it all out? So we want to know what you guys think.
Thank you for being here with us on this crazy journey.
And if you haven't, I would highly recommend the film Serial Killer Culture. It's by a man named John Borowski, and he's also done the Albert Fish movie, the Carl Panzram movie. He's done a couple serial killer-centric films, which you can actually currently find on Netflix and Amazon Prime. Serial Killer Culture is a full-length documentary, and it focuses on the culture of murderabilia. And the movie itself came out, 10 years ago, but it was so popular that they actually just made a short web series on it. And that was released on Amazon this year. And it has some crazy people. Like, there are some people who wrote the Toolbox Murders. And one guy became very, very, very good friends with Roy Norris and Lawrence Bittaker. He considered them his best friends. He was a potential serial killer. I'm sorry, I have nothing nice to say about this particular gentleman.
I don't like him.
No.
I don't like him at all.
He has something severely, severely wrong with him. And then you have, Helen Morrison, who is, I think she's almost 80 now, and she's a psychiatrist, and she has John Wayne Gacy's brain in her basement. She literally petitioned to his family when he was executed and say, I want his brain. And she has his brain just chilling in her basement. Ugh. So where does the line get crossed here? We want to hear from you. So that is it for today, guys. Thank you for joining us.
More like journeying with us.
Thank you for journeying through our
list of paraphilias.
and random thoughts.
And Chris Watts's traced pee-pee.
So later this week, we will be having our first episode of the Lori Vallow deep dive. We're really excited to do that. We want to do it right for everyone because this has been probably the most requested thing that people have emailed and contacted us about. Early next week, we will be starting the first episode in our newest cult series, which is to be determined. So again, guys, thanks for joining. You can find us at www.wesawthedevil.com. Also on Facebook and Twitter at We Saw the Devil, Instagram at We Saw the Devil Podcast. And if you need to email us for a question, concern, you can do so at info@WeSawTheDevil. So our Patreon, don't forget, you can sign up for our Patreon. If you're enjoying the show, want to support it, you can get postcards from around the world for our case of the month, t-shirts, stickers, merch, a Facebook group, which is amazing, and more. So if you are interested in that, you can go to patreon.com/We Saw the Devil, or you can find it directly on our website under support the show. So that is it for this week, guys.
Until next crime.